Okay, we're going to move on now to our next panel, which is going to be my privilege to moderate. We call this one Glass to Glass. And so the idea here was to really look at a little bit at the innovation that's going on between the camera and the screen for the consumer, and maybe dig into what some of the sort of technological innovations are that are changing sports experiences. We've got a great panel, and I'm going to invite them to come on up and join me. We've got Sarah Crennan, who is at Yahoo Sports. Sarah, come on up. Sarah is called Senior Director of Sports Programming. We've got Troy Iwan China. Did I get that right? Close? Okay. He'll correct me. Who's Vice President and General Manager of NBCSports.com. I've got Saswat Panda, who is the CTO and co-founder of LiveLight. Come on up. And Dirk Van Dahl, who's an old friend of NYC Media Lab, who's still VP Multimedia Technology.
That's right.
Now BAM Tech, previously ML BAM. And Dirk actually worked he mentioned this in the last panel, but he worked very closely with Claudio for a number of years on a range of different projects, which we may talk about a little bit today. So this is a great panel, and I'm excited to kind of dig in with them. And folks, we can make this interactive. So if you want to add on or query your fellow panelists or jump in, feel free. But Dirk, maybe I'll start with you because you have a long career at MLBAM, Showtime before that. Whenever I talk to Dirk, he just sort of brims forth with new ideas around artificial intelligence and the latest thing that's happening. But what for you at BAMTech, what's the hottest thing you're working on right now that's going to change the way people capture or distribute or consume sports media content?
I think Claudio alluded to it, and we've worked together, but this notion of being able to have a smart understanding of the event with cameras. That leads to personalization, which is my big buzzword, or individualization of the stream. I know our event here is Glass to Glass, and I am interested in multiple types of camera arrays or more cameras or more glass on the acquisition part, and using those both as picture cameras, but also using them as machine vision cameras to understand where things are, or to do more view interpolation, that sort of matrix move. All these kinds of things are the stuff of making a smarter or an intelligent understanding of what's going on in the event, and then being able to slice that up into smaller pieces and give those individually to people as they desire.
And so one of the things that I'm always interested in is you're even working on how to render artificial angles drawn from content that you're capturing.
Right. That's what I was talking about, like multiple angles. And I wanted to find out about NBC too. I saw in the snowboard that you guys had camera arrays up in there and saw that a couple of times. But in general, it's not just that kind of move that's used in broadcast television, but also just understanding where an object is in space in relation to other competitors or other players or other objects. That information allows you to understand what's going on in the event and to maybe segment that better, and then to render things, using game engines to either render paths or relationships or predictive curves and things like that. All that becomes richer data overlays that can be used both in broadcast, in applications, in VR, and in lots of different places. So just a better understanding, not just taking pictures of an event, but rather where everything is at all times.
So Dirk, you kind of pointed at Troy. Maybe I'll come over to you next. I think it's fair to say the Olympics now, at some point somebody will write a kind of history of how media technology and the Olympics, you can kind of use them as a sort of a chaptering tool for different developments that have happened along the way, how media technology's changed. Talk to us about this year's Olympics and everything that you did to make that experience unique and the new technology that you applied.
Yeah, and let me start by saying it was all me.
Great.
Thank you for the credit. We had 3,000 people that worked on the Olympics, 2,000 in Korea and 1,000 in Stamford, Connecticut. And what you see is just the evolution of choice and fragmentation of people being able to consume content in so many different ways. So you look back, it was a short 18 years ago when we just started to stream, to make video available on the web. And now we're at 1,000+ hours on basically every device that you can think of. So it's the content creation, and then a big effort around the innovation is distribution. You try to get it out as smartly as you can to as many different places. You can't do it all yourself. You have to have some great partnerships. One, for example, we had was with Yahoo Sports that helped attract a really large, significant audience to our content. And another one, for example, was Snapchat. And I know there was an earlier panel about what's the way of the world with Snapchat and its future. Mm-hmm. At least for us, it was a really strong innovation around the Pyeongchang Olympics. We had 40 million people consuming our content in a different way than we as a legacy media television company are typically used to having people consume. So it's certainly an area where technology, innovation, what's new, what's next, always excites us. But we also look at all of the effort that we did. There's still 98% of the tens of millions of people who watched on that big screen television. Mm-hmm. So we're always mindful of that as well.
So even as the new technology sort of moves along, people are still consuming it via broadcast.
It is.
How many different channels could I consume the Olympics on this go round?
Well, there are dozens. You think of our owned and operated platforms, our distribution network, the MVPD World partnerships like Yahoo and Snap that I referenced. So it's a fire hose, if you will. But the key rule that we have when you take a step back is you don't just do it and throw spaghetti against the wall. You need to have your business model and monetization plan attached to it. So we had that across all the different distribution points.
So Sarah, I want to come to you next because I know you're focused very much on the mobile aspect of consumption. What's going on at Yahoo with regard to innovation on mobile?
Sure, we have a lot going on. So we have two massive partnerships with the NBA and the NFL separately. The NFL partnership, we were actually able to do a live beta at the end of January, and that short test without really any marketing focus drove 1.2 million app installs. So we're really excited both about having that experience and programming around it, but also the discoverability that comes with having an experience like that. And then as we think about innovation and trying to own the mobile experience for a sports fan, I think one of the most exciting things that came through our NBA partnership was this innovation fund. And the way we look at that is that it's not just content, it's about the right product and technology experience with content to help support and integrate and really differentiate what the mobile consumer gets on their screen.
Tell us a little more about the innovation fund.
Sure, it's $25 million a year, where we have a joint committee that's kind of ideating and pitching. Both, NBA and Yahoo Sports and Verizon across the board have things that are important to, each of these parties. So we're going through a really in-depth brainstorming process, which is actually one of the most exciting things I've experienced after becoming part of Oath.
Cool. And so that brings me over to Saswat, who is leading the youngest company that's on the stage right now, but has just completed a big round, so just raised almost $10 million for LiveLight. Tell me what you're excited about. What's in the product roadmap for LiveLight?
Yeah, so LiveLight's been around for about 3 years now, and our goal has been to create immersive ways to watch sports. We started in 2015 focusing on VR, trying to give sports fans what we call the ultimate sports watching experience by combining the best of the stadium, the ability to experience the atmosphere, watch all the action from multiple different camera angles, as well as the benefits of watching events with your friends, something that you usually don't get a chance to, especially when your friends are distributed around the city, around the country, and so on. And so for us, that's kind of been the goal. We started with VR back in 2015, but today we've actually expanded to other platforms. So mobile is probably our biggest platform, mobile meaning iOS as well as Android. And then we're expanding beyond that as well with experimenting with AR and trying to figure out ways in which we can come up with solutions that are non-gimmicky with AR as it pertains to sports. So still very early as far as that's concerned, but that's kind of the direction that we're going in.
And can you tell us, just for those who haven't seen it, give us an example of one project you've done that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, so the biggest one we've done so far has actually been with Fox Sports here in the US. So we're a startup, but we're pretty global, so we've done events across the US, Europe, as well as Asia. But the one I'm most proud of and the one that has the most amount of work and innovation done in it is actually the Fox Sports VR application. And there we've got two types of experiences. So we've got our VR, what we call super productions, where we have a production team going to venues, setting up cameras, 6 cameras across the venue. Users get to jump in the experience and watch the best moments from all the different angles. We've got like real-time highlights and so on. And that's what we did with the biggest event we did was the Super Bowl last year.
It's a big event. It's a reasonably big event, yeah.
And the second type of experience that we've been playing around with is actually getting linear feeds like Fox's own television streams on a big screen inside VR. And what ties all of that together is what we call social. We don't have a great name for it yet, but the ability for people to come together and experience live events together in virtual reality. So the presence of actually having a friend feel like they're sitting right next to you, even if they're all the way in India or on the other side of the city.
Mm-hmm. And I know at the Olympics you experimented a little bit with VR and with Intel this go round.
Yep.
So that's an area.
We worked with Intel, and we also did the Super Bowl this year, so we should have connected beforehand. So that maybe NBC would have been the talking point there for you. But
so
remember that next time.
So there are a lot of people in the room today who are either researchers at the university here, they're entrepreneurs, they're keen to possibly break into this industry, solve some problems, maybe even solve some technology problems. So some of you are kind of coming at this from a more technological perspective or a more commercial perspective, but I'd love to know your perspective on what some unsolved problems are in delivering mobile experiences or in doing those multiple complex distribution of a thing like the Olympics or for virtual and augmented reality. I might start with Dirk over there. Dirk, what if you were to wander off and start a company at the moment, leave the Disney, BAMTech empire, what would you go and work on? What are you most excited about at the moment?
Where I started, I think, is the same place. At personalization, I mean, we can have thousands of feeds, but if you can't find out where it is or why it's important to you, it becomes very difficult. If I can give an example of something we're working on now that has to do with the way we do highlights. I'm putting back, we still work for baseball, even though we're BAMTech and somewhat separate. This is actually a product that's in baseball that relies on the StatCast product that both Carlos and Claudio and I have worked on. When you understand the game, it's all now segmented into individual plays. That's sort of just done by using sports data, so we segment that up. So we have all those elements. They're also, we're feeding that into an AI product that looks at changes in win probability. So because of this activity, the game is now changed in win probability. So that gives us a weighting on that. If you come in late to a baseball game today, it would be, you could either watch the game from where you are, or you would start over and watch the whole thing. What we're working on is now segmenting, going back and looking at the win probability changes, looking at 90 seconds worth of those, and giving you a catch-up of 90 seconds of highlights that were designed totally by what happened in the game. And so you do a little catch-up into the game. So we've had an automated way of cutting catch-up. Now, of course, you can imagine, now it's being done on win probability, but you could imagine if we understand better about what our viewer cares about. If they care about pitching, they care about defense, they care about hitting, we could alter what those individual frames are, what those individual clips are. So I think the thing that we're driving at is segmenting these experiences, tagging them in a meaningful way, and then trying to give the people what they want. That's an effective product, I guess.
So that could quite literally be a different product for every single person that comes into the stream.
In the future, we have highlights now that are cut overnight, but in the future, everything should be a highlight. It should be whether it's your highlight or not. That's the thing we're trying to get to. So again, flip it around as to just not what the general top 10% is, but what it is that your 10% is. So understanding what people care about and then trying to fulfill that.
Troy, maybe I'll put it to you. If something that was missing from the arsenal at the Olympics, and you had 3,000 people covering it, what would you have loved to give them to?
I'll give you two quickies. One at a macro level that should apply to everyone, which is we're all fighting for people's time. And across sports in particular, it's very difficult in a world where people are ADD, they're multitasking, and we're generations that are growing into great sports followers, but not watchers, right? So the difficulty of getting people to watch live a 2-hour plus event, it's like the equivalent of sitting here and listening to a panel for 30 minutes. I mean, you're on your phone, you've got to do something else. It's just the way that we're wired now. So that macro level question of how do you as a traditional media company or a new entrepreneur come in and capture people's time in a way that you can build a business around it. So that would be one thing. I think more on a micro level specific to the Olympics, how is it that you can get people to either watch a live feed in a traditional way more or distribute on platforms like mobile that we're all married to get more of people's time consuming it. And one thing that we did around the Olympics is we introduced this, what we call a new enhancement experience, where if you think of way back in the day of pop-up videos, so to speak, and you see a little bit of this with Comcast and X1, it's taking the data and the information and making it contextually relevant to the feed itself. Not a novel concept, but I don't think anyone has really mastered it yet. And for us to be able to think of what is the right way to allow people to interact with and multitask a live feed.
Okay, so for a consumer to be able to go in and interact with the live feed as it's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sarah, what about you? What's if they had a magic wand at Yahoo for new tech? What would you be looking for?
Sure. So similar to what Troy outlined, consumers are spending less time with the live games themselves, and in a world where there are cord nevers growing by the day, we have to figure out how to onboard new fans, how to expose them to these games, to the passion of sport. And so when I think about that and I think about serving a mobile screen, I think my biggest ask would be production innovation. How can we get smaller cameras, easier access, not have to load in with heavy equipment, and have kind of light touch production so that we can expose every element of these incredibly fast-paced games.
I should have mentioned that if you go on Sarah's LinkedIn, she's been a lacrosse freelance analyst and journalist for how long? Quite a long time?
Over 10 years.
Okay.
But it started because I was a player, and just to that point, one of my favorite sports experiences right now is what Inside Lacrosse is doing with lacrosse highlights on Instagram. And so I don't have time to watch all the lacrosse that I love, but I can go on Inside Lacrosse and watch the Carolina player score the game winner over Maryland. And that's amazing for me, and I want to figure out how we can do that with more sports.
Cool. And so that's what are you working on that you think is going to revolutionize things?
Yeah. So I think it actually ties into what everyone's saying here, which is that today when people are watching games, they're not necessarily watching the entire game from start to finish. It's often the highlights, the last the final 10 minutes of the game, or depending on the sport, it could be 15 minutes like highlights of the entire game. But at the same time, what we see a lot more today, what we experience a lot more today, is that sports has become a lot less social from the perspective that you're still interacting with people on social media through messaging and so on. But the experience of watching games with your friends, that feeling that you get on Super Bowl Sunday when you're sitting in a room with 10 people watching a game, you don't get that opportunity every day with every sport that you're watching. And that's really the problem that we're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. I think we've got a long way to get there. I think the product that we've launched with Fox so far is a very early attempt to see what our current thoughts on the matter are and get some data on it. Mm-hmm. But I think the long-term solution is going to be a lot more complicated, and it's not something that.
How long do you think it will be before I'm sitting in a virtual stadium with a hyper-realistic 360 experience along with dozens, maybe all of these people, we're all there together?
I would guess at least 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
At least 5 to 10 years. I think within the next 5 years, we'll start seeing early adopters actually start using the platform for watching live sports. But if you're talking about everyone in this room, it's going to be at least at a minimum, a good amount of time before we get there.
But it could be within NBC's Olympics rights window, so it might be quite time. So we're going to have the audience ask some questions as well, if my mic runners are ready. So if anybody wants to throw up a hand, you can do that. Yes, sir. Right down front, right here.
Hi, Saswat. This question is for you. How do you anticipate LiveLike utilizing augmented reality moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the aspects of augmented reality we've kind of ideated around are more around like ARKit, ARCore platforms for mobile. And unfortunately, most of the stuff that we've actually come across has been, and most of the ideas and things we've looked at have actually been very gimmicky, right? They're great to try out. They're really cool ideas. People might try it out once in a while, but it doesn't really create a whole lot of long-term user value. And then the second aspect of augmented reality is the headsets like HoloLens and the others. And those are much longer term. I think that's where VR and AR will actually merge. But again, that's at least like 5 to 10 years out when it comes to the hands of consumers. So in terms of how people could use augmented reality, things we're looking into is there a way that augmented reality could make it, even on a small phone screen, could actually make it feel like your friend's there in the room with you, right? So maybe it could mean that you've got localized voice or VoIP audio, right? So you're able to hear your friends around you, and when you move the phone around, you've got your friend there, you can interact with them, and so on. So it's still very early, but it's kind of something that we're trying to dig into, and we think it'll take some time before the use cases make a lot of sense. At the same time, we're also looking at the market, trying to see what are the ways that people are using augmented reality in other fields, whether it's gaming or productivity, and then trying to figure out how we can tie that back into the social engagement aspect.
Anybody else got a comment on augmented reality? Anything you've done this go round? Or Dirk, I know you guys have done a lot of experience at MLBAN.
Yeah, we use it a little bit differently, again, because we have this advantage of sports data, and we have the ability to fit cameras into coordinate space. We've actually experimented with putting a camera on your own phone inside a stadium, being able to point at it, understand where the diamond is so it can see where all the players are. We can overlay player tracking data in the broadcast style. That's actually less interesting because people don't care about that kind of metrics when they're at the game. We're more interested in doing gamification with that same sort of thing and actually filling the points in a baseball game where we're waiting for the pitcher to come up. So looking at pitcher batter probabilities and heat maps on there, and maybe having different sections of the stadium bet on if you think it's going to go right field, think it's going to go left field based on this, and then being able to give a coupon away. I will say that as much as we try and come up with ideas that are clever to use the game, the thing that people mostly care about at stadiums with augmented reality is where's the closest bathroom and how long is the line. So the notion of being able to
the future of augmented reality.
Yeah.
There you go. Hey, another question from the audience. Yes, right here, sir.
So this question is for Troy. So I've been working a long time in doing 360 video and VR content, live content, a lot with the NBC News. One of the biggest questions that I get is, how do I monetize VR content? Because this doesn't have the traditional revenue model where you can just place an ad. So I'm just wondering, if you have any ideas about monetization inside of VR, AR?
Is that one of the reasons why your VR experiments so far have been relatively limited, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have a magic bullet to offer and say, here's exactly how you do it, because we had that, we'd be doing it right now. So what I'd say is you need to tread cautiously, but find the right partners to help bring it to market. And whether it be partners for us like Verizon, Yahoo Sports, who can help with the distribution and the eyeballs against it, or whether it be partners like Intel, who can help subsidize the entire effort. That's typically how we look at it. And I mean, it's a general theme with everything around content, right, is someone has to pay somewhere, whether it's an advertiser, whether it's a distributor, or whether it's a consumer directly. Somehow you need to figure that out, and it's going to vary depending on what the use case is.
Well, Sarah, Saswat, any experiences so far with monetization in virtual reality content?
Honestly, we see it more as a marketing tool than we do necessarily a big opportunity for money. I think it's about serving our consumer first. And so when and if we venture into AR, VR, it's really about, okay, this is the best experience to give, and we're going to put monetization down here for now while those tools evolve.
Still early. Saswat?
Same. So today, most of the monetization actually happens through for marketing purposes, right? A lot of sponsorship, a lot of branding opportunities within the VR experience. I think long term, as the user base grows, there's a lot of different ways to actually monetize each individual user, but that's not been the goal for now.
Mm-hmm. I've got time for one last question. Got one right here in the front.
Question for Dirk. So you mentioned using win probabilities sort of in understanding the game. Have you used like betting odds as part of the reward function for your machine learning models?
As part of the
to train your machine learning models, like on event detection and recognition. Have you used the
we have not. Again, I don't work for baseball anymore, so I don't want to speak for them. And traditionally, baseball has shied away from wagering in general. I think that's...
Apart from Pete Rose, I suppose.
What's that?
Apart from Pete Rose, I suppose.
That's exactly why. That's the answer. I think the larger question is that all this is useful math to understand what's going on. The same, even what we just talked about in the gamification here with pitcher-batter matchups for heat maps for probability of where the ball's going to land. It's part and parcel of the same thing. It's just different level of gaming, I guess is what we'd say.
That was a very specific question, which leaves us time for exactly one more. Does anybody else have a last one? Anybody out there? Okay, I'm going to ask the last one then. Yep, we got one in the back. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got one.
Yes, please.
I can just speak up too. Troy, this question's for you. I had a really nostalgic experience last year with the Skycam. Just curious, I know this is about, like, we're talking about VR and AR, and Skycam is a little bit removed from that, but I really enjoyed that, like, Madden NFL kind of experience in the Sunday night and Thursday night games. Just curious about your thoughts there and moving that kind of experience forward, like nostalgic wise.
So I'll start by saying that anyone who knows me, I'm a hockey guy, so I can't talk about football-related nostalgia with a straight face because you can call me out pretty easily. But one thing that I do is I listen to a lot of people, and I would say it was the same thing. There was a lot of really positive feedback about that experience, and I know we listen well and take it to heart. As the non-production guy, it's easy for me to say, oh, we're going to do a lot more of it and you're going to love it. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but you're not in the minority when you talk about what we've heard related to people's experiences. Yeah.
I want to thank this panel. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.